This all started because I offered my wife's tombstone a tuna sandwich. That probably sounds insane, so here's the backstory. For our first date, Emma and I had a picnic on the beach. I'd asked if she liked tuna. She said sure, so I made sandwiches. We picnicked a lot during our first year together, and tuna was on the menu 50% of the time. For our first anniversary, we went to that beach spot again. But as I handed Emma her sandwich, she said, "I've got to tell you something. Tuna? It's repulsive. I'd literally rather eat it after it's gone through my digestive system. No offense." She'd assumed she'd like the taste before our date, but the second she took that first bite, she wanted to bleach her tongue. The problem is, when she saw all the love and care I'd put into the crusts and dill pickles, she felt too guilty to spit it out. I just laughed. And for all future picnics, I always jokingly offered her the first bite of my tuna sandwich. Last year, Emma died on Valentine's Day. She was speeding home from work because I'd cooked a romantic dinner. For 3 months, I barely climbed out of bed except to shit and eat, until one sunny afternoon when I randomly packed a picnic basket and jumped in the car. Her grave sits at the top of a grassy knoll in the shade of an elm tree. There, I laid out a red blanket and food. Without thinking, I offered her headstone a bite of my tuna sandwich. And once I realized what I'd done, I laughed for the first time since the accident. So, anytime the weather was decent, I went back. These picnic dates really brightened my mood, and before long, I got on a first-name basis with Harry the groundskeeper. In August, as I unfurled the blanket, a gust of wind ripped it from my hands and swooped it across the face of a lady standing down the hill. I raced over as she clumsily tried freeing herself, then wrestled the blanket back. The woman underneath had real Disney princess energy, all blue eyes and curly black hair. Her name was Ruth. She was visiting her late husband, Christian Mary, whose name stuck in my head because my first thought was, "Merry Christmas." From then on, when I visited Emma's grave, sometimes I spotted Ruth at that same spot. We occasionally gave each other friendly waves. Then, one afternoon, she strolled along the path as I started packing up. "Walk you to the gate?" she asked. "Sure." On the way past, she touched Emma's gravestone once and smiled at me. "So, what's with the sandwiches? Sometimes I see you and it's like you showing off what you ate to the tombstone." When I explained the meaning behind the ritual, she said, "That's so sweet. Christian loved tuna too." She faced me dead on, locked her eyes on mine, and said, "Do you ever think grief is heavenly?" Sure. Down the hill, there was a nasty gust of wind, and Ruth did a pretend dive for cover as if another blanket might attack. I burst out laughing. Then I asked her to coffee. That night, the barbs of grief stung real bad. What sort of bastard asks for another woman's number within earshot of his wife's grave? My friends promised I hadn't broken any rules, and even Harry encouraged me to put myself out there. "That pretty lady's been around here for years. You two would be good together." And so, over a series of coffee dates, I poured my grief into Ruth. "I feel exactly the same," she said. "I thought I was broken too when I lost Christian." She rarely talked about her late husband, and when she did, she kept the details vague. Some pain is just too raw to share, I figured. The first night we spent together happened by accident, a dinner date that ran long. In the morning, after I kissed her goodbye, I threw my back against the door and slid to the ground, sobbing. Casual coffees were one thing, but this had morphed into a full-blown affair. I was terrified of visiting Emma's grave again in case she rose from the dead to kick my ass. Earlier this year, Ruth had problems with her asshole landlord, so I suggested she stay with me, temporarily, and for a few months, I left the past in the rearview mirror. We even went on a few picnics, although I never made Ruth a tuna sandwich. Things changed when she asked how we should celebrate Valentine's Day, the first anniversary of Emma's accident. Let me tell you, that guilt swung back hard. The dirt around Emma's headstone was still fresh. What sort of husband jumped into another relationship so fast? In the end, I decided I needed to move on sooner or later, so I made a plan. Visit Emma on Valentine's Day morning, then spend the afternoon with Ruth. I just needed to break the news ahead of time rather than on her death anniversary. So I pulled out all the stops for a killer picnic, despite the crappy weather. On the grassy knoll, I'd barely finished unscrewing the coffee flask when the tears came. I confessed all about my new relationship, about how I'd never meant to move on so fast, and how deeply, deeply sorry I was. Emma's grave took the news surprisingly well. In all seriousness, deep in my gut, I knew she would have wanted me to find happiness. The only thing left to do was finish a quick side quest, visit Christian Mary's grave. He deserved to know the new guy in Ruth's life thought the world of her. Past the tree, I checked the headstone she usually stood over. A married couple were buried there, the Presleys. I marched around, going in circles, widening my search every time. No Christian. At the groundskeeper's shack, I asked Harry about his grave. Harry consulted the notes and then walked me past the hill through an alley of trees. Christian's resting place was further along I'd ever seen Ruth hang out. Weird, but not as weird as what I found next. According to the inscription, he died on the 6th of October, 2 months after my blanket blew onto Ruth's face, which would have meant she'd hung around the grave before he died. At dinner, I casually asked her, "Hey, so I know this isn't an easy topic, but where's Christian buried?" She froze, a forkful of casserole halfway to her mouth. Why? Well, Valentine's Day is the anniversary of Emma's accident, so I was gonna pop by. I thought maybe I'd pay my respects to Christian too. Keeping my voice casual, I added, "He's on the far side of the tree, right? Just down the hill?" "He's further down." But then I didn't like getting too close. Standing over his grave made me sick, okay? I understand. I waited a second. By the way, when did he pass? March? April? Why are you interrogating me? Don't you realize how hard this is for me? With that, she carried her plate and glass into the kitchen. After Ruth went to bed, I Googled Christian Mary and combed through an article about a freak sailing accident. The body of Mr. Mary, 34, was recovered from the water near a jetty off the coast. Ruth Mary said her husband fell into the water while on deck to check a fishing line. The date? August 6th, 2 months after our cute meeting. Something didn't add up. But over the next few days, anytime I broached the subject with Ruth, the waterworks started straight away. And then she'd ask me to hold her while she cried, or accuse me of interrogating her. How was I supposed to get answers? Ruth still visited the graveyard, so the next time she set off, I tailed her disguised in a trench coat and sunglasses. I expected her to make for the hill, but instead she went around the valley and past a lake. In a completely different section, she sat alone on a wooden bench. I felt like a rotten turd. Maybe visiting the actual grave was too painful for her. As I turned to leave, a man with a scraggly beard sat beside her for a chat. Now and then they touched each other's arms or threw their heads back laughing. Obviously, they knew each other well. After 20 minutes, they both stood, and then they shared a weird, awkward kiss. Unplanned, judging by how neither of them knew what to do with their hands afterwards. Part of me wanted to run up for a big, dramatic bust-up, but there was too much racing through my mind. I bolted out of there instead. What did this mean? Did she lose interest in me? Was that why she never talked about Christian? Because this other guy was a better listener? As strange as this sounds, a massive sense of relief washed over me. It felt like I deserved to be cheated on for betraying Emma. Back home, Ruth came through the door and kissed me as if her graveyard romance never happened. In the end, I decided the affair needed to wait. Valentine's Day had almost arrived, which meant I had a lot of problems to deal with. Hell, maybe explaining the situation to Emma would help me straighten the mess out. On the morning of the big day, I wrapped 2 tuna sandwiches and slipped them into a basket, along with a thermos of coffee and some iced buns. I got halfway out the door when Ruth asked me to go upstairs, said there was a giant spider in the tub. The bathroom was pest-free. "Must have scurried off," she said as I came back down. Then she smiled and handed me my keys. At the graveyard, my heart cracked in half before I even laid out the blanket. I confessed everything to Emma, how I'd met another woman, how that other woman met another man, and that the whole mess felt like a punishment for moving on too soon. Unloading my problems made me feel 50 pounds lighter. I wiped away the tears and finished laying out the picnic. Then, like always, I offered Emma's headstone the first bite of a tuna sandwich. Since she wasn't hungry, I helped myself. But that first bite seemed off. Not in taste, just wrong. My chest tightened. I reminded myself how to breathe. I went to wipe away sweat, but my arms grew heavy. I grabbed the thermos, and by now my hand was trembling. It's like I could only suck oxygen through a straw. I thumped my chest, gasped for air, and finally spat bread all over Emma's grave. Part of me screamed, "You're dying," but a louder part screamed, "You just disgraced your wife's grave, you prick." I remember rolling onto my back and seeing her standing there. Ruth! I clawed at the air above my chest, pleading for help, and when that didn't work, I gestured at my throat. Then I noticed the remains of my sandwich in her hand. Without warning, she straddled me and forced more tuna into my mouth. The taste of mayo and pickle made me gag even harder. I needed to stop her. I bit down on her fingers until she ripped her hand away. She didn't scream or yelp or cry out, just narrowed her eyes at me. Next thing I knew, she clamped my nostrils shut. In her free hand, she had a clump of tuna, poised and ready for the second my mouth opened. "You're not the first, you know," she sneered, "but you were the sweetest. The tuna thing? That really touched me. Most men can't love dead women like you do." Dead woman. I craned my neck back and looked straight up. Emma's grave was only a few feet above my skull. I bucked my hips. Ruth flew forward, slamming her forehead straight into Emma's tombstone with a dull thud. A trail of blood trickled down right above the point where it said "beloved wife." Then Ruth rolled onto her side, groaning. My body wouldn't quit shaking. I felt like I was drowning as I rolled down the hill. Then I crawled right through a funeral procession. A group of mourners, each dressed in black, screamed in alarm. A priest threatened to have me arrested until he saw the shade of blue my face had turned. The ambulance ride was a blur. My first clear memory, waking up with an IV. The nurses said the first thing I asked was if they thought Emma might ever forgive me. A blood test revealed that my tuna sandwich had been laced with fentanyl. Inside the picnic basket, they found an envelope addressed to Emma in my handwriting. In it, I confessed how no woman could ever replace her, so I was committing suicide via poisoned picnic to honor her memory. The man Ruth met on the bench, Gavin, said she told him her most recent boyfriend committed suicide, and she went there to visit my resting place. Said they bonded over their mutual grief. Ruth is denying all of this, obviously. Says I'm nuts. So far as I can tell, she's some kind of black widow who has a fetish for bereaved husbands. The police are still trying to make sense of this mess. The second I got out of hospital, I visited Emma's grave, only to discover somebody had left a tuna sandwich beneath the headstone. I think I'm done with romance for a while.